The moment they laugh at you is the moment you learn how alone you really are. The first drop of wine hit my dress before I even realized someone had moved their hand. A deep red stain spread across the pale fabric, blooming like something alive, something that didn't belong. Then came the laughter. Soft at first, whispered behind manicured hands. But it didn't stay quiet for long. It never does. I stood there, frozen, one hand instinctively moving to my stomach, fingers pressing gently, as if I could shield something far more fragile than myself. 24 weeks. That's what the doctor said. 24 weeks and counting. And somehow, that number had become the only thing anyone saw when they looked at me. Not Lily. Not a person. Just a situation. She really showed up like that? Someone muttered, not even bothering to lower their voice. I mean, no ring. No man. What did she expect? Another voice chimed in, sharper this time, cutting through the room like glass. It's honestly embarrassing. I swallowed, the taste of humiliation thick and metallic in my mouth. My heels suddenly felt too high, too unstable, like I was balancing on something that could collapse any second. The ballroom lights were too bright, too unforgiving. Every crystal chandelier above me seemed to reflect a version of myself I didn't recognize. Smaller, weaker, easier to judge. I should have left. I knew that. The moment the invitations were handed out at work, the moment I saw the guest list filled with names that carried weight and expectations I could never meet, I should have known this wasn't my world anymore. Maybe it never was. But I needed the job, needed the paycheck, needed to prove, if only to myself, that I could still stand in rooms like this without disappearing. I tightened my grip around my clutch, knuckles whitening as another ripple of laughter spread nearby. No one stopped it. No one stepped in. They just watched. That was the worst part. Not the words. Not even the stares. It was the watching. The quiet agreement that I deserved it. I lowered my gaze, focusing on the marble floor beneath my feet, tracing the faint veins running through it like cracks that hadn't quite broken through yet. My breathing slowed. Controlled. Quiet. I had learned that much. Stay quiet. Don't react. Don't give them more. My free hand pressed more firmly against my stomach this time, a silent promise. I'm okay. We're okay. Even if the room didn't believe it. Even if I wasn't entirely sure myself. To my left, a chair sat empty. Reserved. Untouched. I hadn't questioned it when I first sat down, hadn't asked who it was for. It didn't matter. Nothing here belonged to me anyway. Another voice rose, louder now, emboldened by the lack of consequence. Honestly, I don't even know why they let her in. That one landed differently. Not sharper. Not louder. Just heavier. Like it carried something final. I felt it in my chest, in the way my shoulders sank just a fraction, in the way my fingers curled tighter against my dress, as if I could hold myself together by sheer will. And still, I didn't say a word. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's survival. The doors at the far end of the ballroom opened. I didn't look up. Not yet. I had already learned what happens when you expect something to change. Nothing does. Until it does. I felt it before I saw it. The shift. It was subtle, like the air itself had changed direction. Conversations did not stop all at once, but they thinned, stretched, hesitated. Laughter cut off mid-breath. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Something had entered the room, something that did not need to announce itself to be noticed. I kept my eyes on the floor, telling myself it did not matter, that whatever was happening behind me had nothing to do with me, but my body betrayed me anyway. My spine straightened. My breath caught. The faint sound of footsteps echoed across the marble, steady and unhurried, each one landing with quiet certainty. Not loud, not aggressive, just undeniable. Someone important. That was the only explanation. People do not fall silent like that for anything else. I should have stayed focused. I should have stayed invisible. That was the plan. But curiosity is a dangerous thing when you have nothing left to protect except your pride. So I looked up. Just slightly. Just enough. And that was when I saw him. Black suit. Perfectly tailored. The kind of fit that does not come from a store, but from intention. Dark hair. Pushed back like he did not have time to worry about it. Yet somehow it looked deliberate. Controlled. His presence did not demand attention. It absorbed it. People moved without being asked, stepping aside as he walked forward, creating a path that did not exist seconds ago. I did not know his name. I did not need to. The way the room reacted told me everything. Power does not introduce itself. It reveals itself in silence. My heart began to beat faster, not out of fear exactly, but recognition. Not of him, of what he represented. A world that was not mine. A world that could erase someone like me without consequence. I lowered my gaze again, quickly this time, as if eye contact alone might pull me into something I could not escape. This was not for me. None of it was. The footsteps grew closer. Closer than they should have. I assumed he would pass. Men like him always passed. They did not stop for girls like me, standing in stained dresses with whispered rumors clinging to them like shadows. But the steps slowed. Then stopped. Right beside me. I did not move. I could not. The space next to me, the empty chair that had meant nothing just minutes ago, suddenly felt intentional. Reserved. Not forgotten. A presence settled into it. Calm and controlled. I could feel it without looking. The faint scent of something expensive, clean, sharp. Not overwhelming. Just enough to remind you that everything about him was chosen carefully. The room did not return to normal. It waited. That was the strangest part. It waited for him. For what he would do. For what he would say. I kept my eyes down, fingers tightening slightly against my dress, aware of every breath, every second stretching longer than it should. Then, finally, he spoke. Not to the room. Not to anyone else. To me. His voice was low, steady, close enough that I felt it before I fully heard it. Why are they laughing at you? The question was simple. Too simple. It should have been easy to answer. But something about the way he said it made my throat tighten, made every practiced response disappear. Because he did not sound curious. He sounded precise. Like he was not asking for information. He was asking for truth. I hesitated, just for a second, my fingers brushing instinctively over my stomach again, grounding myself in something real. Something that mattered more than this room. More? Than their opinions, more than him. It does not matter. I whispered, my voice softer than I intended, barely carrying past the space between us. It was the safest answer. The smallest answer. The one that would end this interaction before it could become something else. Something dangerous. There was a pause. Not long, but enough to make my pulse stutter. And then I felt it. Not a touch. Not yet. Just attention. Focused. Undivided. Like for the first time that night, someone was not looking at me as a mistake, but as something worth understanding. And somehow, that felt far more terrifying. I should have stayed quiet. I should have let the moment pass like everything else that night. But something in the way he asked it made silence feel heavier than the truth. My fingers tightened slightly against the fabric of my dress, still damp where the wine had soaked through, the chills settling into my skin like a reminder I could not shake. I kept my eyes down, watching the faint reflection of us in the polished marble floor, distorted and distant, like a version of reality that did not quite belong to me. They are not laughing at me, I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. Each word chosen carefully, measured, controlled. They are laughing at what they think I am. The distinction mattered. At least to me. Another pause followed, but it felt different this time. Not uncertain. Not waiting. Evaluating. I could feel it, the way his attention sharpened, like he was turning my words over, testing them for something deeper. Around us, the room had not returned to normal. Conversations had resumed, but they were quieter now, strained, like everyone was pretending not to listen while listening to everything. I could feel their eyes again, but not the same way as before. Not mocking. Not amused. Watching. Careful. And what do they think you are, he asked. Still calm. Still low. But there was something else beneath it now. Something colder. I swallowed, my throat dry, my hand instinctively moving again to rest over my stomach, grounding myself in the one truth that mattered more than anything else in that room. Someone who made a mistake, I answered. It came out softer than I intended, almost lost in the space between us, but I knew he heard it. He heard everything. I did not expect what came next. Not a reaction. Not sympathy. Not even surprise. Just stillness. A kind of stillness that felt deliberate, like the moment before something changes and you do not yet know how. Then his chair shifted slightly, the faint sound of movement drawing attention without effort. I felt it immediately. The room noticed too. I did not look up right away, but I could sense it, the way the air tightened, the way people nearby went quiet again without understanding why. He was no longer just sitting beside me. He was present, intentionally. And then I felt it. His hand. Not grabbing. Not forcing. Just a light, deliberate touch beneath my chin, guiding my gaze upward before I could stop it. My breath caught. Not because of fear. Not exactly. But because for the first time that night, someone was not looking at me through assumptions. His eyes were steady, dark, focused entirely on me like nothing else in the room existed. Not the whispers. Not the judgment. Just me. Look at me, he said quietly. I did. I do not know why. Maybe because he did not sound like someone used to being ignored. Maybe because part of me wanted to believe, even for a second, that I was not invisible. His gaze flickered briefly, not away, but downward, to where my hand rested protectively over my stomach. Something in his expression shifted. Not softer, not weaker, just certain. When his eyes met mine again, there was no hesitation left in them. You are not a mistake, he said. The words were simple, almost too simple. But the way he said them made something inside my chest tighten, like a part of me I had been holding together for too long had just been seen. Before I could respond, before I could even process what that meant, he moved. Just enough. His hand lifted from my chin, but it did not leave me completely. Instead, it reached for my left hand. My breath caught again, sharper this time, as his fingers turned my hand gently, exposing the bare space where something should have been, where everyone had already judged me for what was missing. The absence of a ring. The absence of a story they could respect. He studied it for a second. Not long. Just enough. Then he looked back at me, his voice quieter now, but somehow even more final. That is where they are wrong. The room did not breathe after that. It held itself still, like everyone was waiting for something they could not yet name. I felt it too. The weight of his words, the certainty behind them, pressing against everything I thought I understood about this night. My hand was still in his, my fingers slightly curled, not pulling away, not holding on, just suspended in a moment that did not feel real. You do not know me, I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. It was not defiance. Not exactly. More like a fragile attempt to hold on to whatever control I had left. His thumb brushed lightly against the back of my hand. Not enough to be intimate, not enough to cross a line, just enough to remind me that he was still there, still focused, still completely unaffected by the tension surrounding us. I know enough, he replied. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. It carried anyway, quiet but precise, cutting through the fragile noise of the room like something sharper than volume. I could feel eyes on us again. Not curious anymore. Not amused. Careful. Measuring. The same people who had laughed just minutes ago were now watching like they were witnessing something they did not fully understand. Something they could not control. I shifted slightly in my seat, my heartbeat uneven, my thoughts struggling to catch up with what was happening. You should not be sitting here, I said softly, my gaze flickering briefly toward the empty space around us that no longer felt empty at all. This is not. I hesitated, searching for the right word, the safest word. Your place. It was the wrong thing to say. I realized it the moment the words left my mouth. Not because he reacted the way I expected, but because he did not react at all. No offense. No irritation. Just a slow, almost imperceptible tilt of his head, like he was considering something far more interesting than the sentence itself. Then he did something that made the entire room shift again. He stood. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just stood. But when he did, the effect was immediate. Chairs stilled. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the faint clinking of glasses seemed to disappear into the background. Power does not need to be loud to be heard. And he carried it like it belonged to him. He did not look at anyone else. Not yet. His attention remained on me, steady, unbroken, as if the rest of the room did not exist. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. My breath caught, not from fear, but from the quiet intensity of the moment, the way every second stretched just a little longer than it should. He pulled out a small, simple box. Dark. Unmarked. Nothing extravagant about it, except for the way he held it, like it carried meaning far beyond what it looked like. My chest tightened. What are you doing? I asked, barely above a whisper, the question fragile, uncertain, already knowing I might not be ready for the answer. He did not respond immediately. Instead, he opened the box with one smooth motion. Inside, a ring. Elegant. Understated. The kind of piece that did not need to prove its value because it was already known. My pulse stumbled. The absence that had defined me all night, The empty space on my hand that had invited judgment and whispers and quiet cruelty suddenly felt seen. He took my hand again, more firmly this time, but still gentle, still controlled. "You said they think you made a mistake," he said, his voice low enough that it was meant only for me, yet somehow it reached further. "They are looking at the wrong detail." I could barely breathe. My fingers trembled slightly in his grasp, not pulling away, not moving forward, just caught in the space between what was and what could be. "This changes everything," I whispered, my voice barely holding together. His gaze did not waver, not even for a second. "No," he said quietly. "This reveals everything." My hand should have pulled away. That would have been the normal reaction, the safe reaction, but it did not. It stayed in his, caught between disbelief and something far more dangerous. Hope. The ring rested between his fingers, catching the light just enough to draw attention without asking for it. Everything about him worked like that. Nothing loud, nothing excessive, just precise, intentional. I cannot," I whispered, the words barely forming, my voice unsteady for the first time that night. Not because I did not understand what he was doing, but because I did, and that made it impossible. "You do not even know me." My fingers trembled slightly, a quiet betrayal I could not control. "You do not know what this means." His gaze did not shift, not to the room, not to the people watching us like they were witnessing something unreal. "Just me. Only me. I know exactly what it means," he said. Calm, certain, like he had already made the decision long before I found the courage to question it. The weight of the room pressed in again, but it felt different now. Not judgment, not cruelty, anticipation. They were waiting, not for me, for him, for what he would do next. Because somehow, without understanding how, this moment had stopped being mine. It belonged to him now. I shook my head slightly, a small movement, almost invisible, but it was all I could manage. "You should not fix something that is not yours," I said, forcing the words out, clinging to logic, to reason, to anything that could make this stop before it became something I could not undo. His expression did not change. Not softer, not harder, just resolved. "I am not fixing anything," he replied. His thumb brushed once against my hand again, grounding, deliberate. "I am correcting what they got wrong." My breath caught. Around us, I could feel it again. The shift. Not curiosity anymore. Not even caution. Respect. Fear. Recognition. Someone near the edge of the table shifted uncomfortably. Another lowered their gaze entirely. The same voices that had laughed minutes ago had disappeared, like they had never existed at all. That was power. Not loud. Not forced. Just understood. I swallowed, my chest tight, my thoughts unraveling faster than I could hold them together. Why? The question slipped out before I could stop it. It was the only one that mattered. Why me? Why now? Why this? For a second, just one, something in his eyes changed. Not uncertainty, not doubt, something deeper, something quieter. "Because you stood there," he said, his voice lower now, almost private despite the silence surrounding us. "And you did not break." The words hit harder than anything that had been said all night. Not because they were loud, but because they were true. I had not broken, even when it would have been easier, even when no one would have blamed me. My fingers tightened slightly, in his grasp without meaning to. The smallest response. But he noticed. He noticed everything. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted the ring. The movement was simple, but the room reacted like it was something else entirely. Final. Decisive. I felt my heartbeat in my throat, uneven, loud in the silence that surrounded us. "This is not a question," he said quietly. Not cold, not harsh, just certain. My breath faltered. Every instinct told me to pull away, to stop this, to step back into the version of my life that made sense, even if it hurt. But something deeper, something quieter, held me still. Maybe it was the way he looked at me. Not like I needed saving. Not like I was broken. Just seen. And for the first time that night, I realized something that frightened me more than anything else. I did not feel small anymore. I felt chosen. The ring hovered between us for one suspended second that felt longer than the entire night. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, steady and uneven at the same time, like my body had not decided whether to fight or surrender. His hand did not shake, not even slightly. Of course it did not. Men like him did not hesitate. Men like him decided. Sebastian, the name left my lips before I even realized I knew it. A whisper, soft and uncertain, but it changed something. His eyes flickered for the briefest moment, not away, but deeper, like he was acknowledging something unspoken between us. The room reacted again. A subtle shift. Recognition spreading like a quiet ripple. They knew that name. Of course they did. And suddenly, this was not just a moment anymore. It was a statement. My breath caught, my fingers instinctively curling, not pulling away, but not fully reaching either. You cannot just decide this for me, I said, my voice trembling slightly despite everything I had held together so far. It was not resistance. Not fully. More like a last attempt to understand the ground beneath my feet before it completely disappeared. He studied me for a second. Not impatient. Not annoyed. Just focused. Like I was the only variable that mattered in a room full of controlled outcomes. I am not deciding for you, he said quietly. His voice softened, just enough to shift the weight of the moment without losing its certainty. I am standing where no one else did. The words settled into me slowly, heavier than anything else he had said, because they were not dramatic. They were not meant to impress. They were simply true. I looked around then, just for a second. Really looked. The same faces. The same people. But they were different now. No one laughed. No one whispered. No one dared to meet my eyes for more than a second. Their confidence had disappeared, replaced by something quieter. Something cautious. The world had not changed. He had changed how it treated me. My gaze returned to him, my chest tight, my thoughts unraveling in ways I could not control anymore. If I say no? I asked, the question fragile, almost afraid of its own answer. For the first time, he paused. Not long, but enough. His eyes softened just slightly, not losing their intensity, but revealing something beneath it. Respect. Then I will still sit here, he said. Calm. Honest. And they will still stop laughing. My breath hitched. That was it. No pressure. No demand. No force. Just presence. Just protection. Offered, not taken. My fingers trembled again, but this time it was different. Not fear. Not uncertainty. Something quieter. Something steadier. Slowly, almost without realizing it, I stopped pulling back. The resistance that had kept me anchored to who I was before this night loosened, just enough to let something else in. Not trust. Not yet. But possibility. His hand moved then, deliberate and careful, guiding mine slightly forward, giving me the choice to stop him if I wanted to. I did not. The ring slid onto my finger with a smooth, effortless motion, like it had always belonged there. The metal felt cool against my skin at first, then warm, like it was adjusting, settling into something real. The room inhaled. Not loudly, not dramatically, but collectively. I felt it. Every eye, every thought, every assumption shifting at once. He did not look at them. He did not need to. His focus remained on me, his thumb brushing lightly once against the ring, a small, grounding gesture that felt far more intimate than anything else that had happened. Now, he said quietly, his voice steady, controlled, final. Let them look again. The ring felt heavier than it should have. Not physically, but in a way I could not explain, like it carried. More than metal, more than design, more than meaning. It carried a shift. I could feel it in the way the room changed its posture around me, like an invisible line had been drawn and everyone suddenly knew not to cross it. I did not need to look to know they were staring again. But this time, it was different. It was not curiosity, not judgment. It was calculation. I lifted my hand slowly, almost hesitantly, my eyes tracing the ring like I was seeing something impossible settle into reality. The stone caught the light with quiet confidence, not flashing, not demanding attention, just existing in a way that made everything else seem smaller. My breath steadied, just a little. Beside me, Sebastian remained still, grounded, like nothing about this moment surprised him. Like this outcome had always been inevitable. Look at them, he said softly. Not a command. Not quite. But close enough that my body responded before my mind could argue. I turned. Slowly. Carefully. The same faces. The same people. But they were not the same anymore. The woman who had laughed earlier avoided my gaze completely, her attention suddenly very focused on the glass in her hand. The man who had made the quiet comment about me not belonging shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his posture no longer relaxed, his confidence gone. Even the ones who had said nothing, who had only watched, now looked like they wished they had done more. Or less. Or something different. Silence had consequences too. I felt it then. Not power. Not exactly. But something close. Not because of the ring. Not even because of him. But because for the first time that night, I was not shrinking under their gaze. I was standing inside it. And it was them who looked smaller. My fingers tightened slightly around my clutch, grounding myself again, reminding myself that this was still me. Still my life. Even if it no longer looked the same. They have nothing to say now. I murmured, more to myself than to him. My voice sounded different. Not stronger. Just steadier. Like something had settled into place. They never did, Sebastian replied quietly. His tone did not carry arrogance. Just truth. They only had noise. I exhaled slowly, the tension in my chest loosening just enough to let me breathe again. The room began to move, but carefully. Now, like every action was being measured, reconsidered. Conversations restarted, but softer. Controlled. No one wanted to be the one who crossed the line again. I felt a shift beside me as Sebastian finally turned his attention away from me and toward the room. It was subtle, but immediate. The energy changed again, sharper this time, more defined. His presence expanded, no longer contained to just me, but extending outward, touching every corner of the space without effort. Enjoy the evening, he said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by those closest to us, but somehow reaching further. It was not a request. It was not an invitation. It was permission, and that was somehow more powerful than anything else. People nodded. Quietly. Respectfully. Some even offered small, careful smiles in my direction, like they were trying to rewrite the last 20 minutes without saying it out loud. I felt it. The shift from judgment to approval. From dismissal to attention. It should have felt satisfying. It should have felt like victory. But instead, it felt strange. Because nothing about me had changed. Not really. I was still the same person who walked into this room alone. The same person they had laughed at. The only difference was him. And what he chose to do. I glanced down at the ring again, my fingers brushing lightly against it, as if confirming it was real. Then I looked at him. Really looked this time. At the calm in his posture. The control in his expression. The quiet certainty that did not waver, even for a second. You just changed everything, I said softly. Not accusing. Not grateful. Just stating what was undeniable. He did not smile. Not fully. Just a slight shift at the corner of his mouth. Something almost imperceptible. No, he said, his voice low, steady, certain. I just made them see it. For a moment, I forgot how to exist inside my own body. The room moved again, slowly returning to life around us. But I felt suspended somewhere in between who I was before and who I was becoming. My fingers lingered on the ring, tracing its edge like I needed to memorize it. Like if I stopped paying attention it might disappear and take everything with it. Lily. My name sounded different in his voice. Not louder. Not softer. Just deliberate. Like it had. Wait. I looked at him again, drawn by something I could not quite define. Something that made it impossible to look away even when I told myself I should. Stand up, he said quietly. Not forceful. Not demanding. But there was no hesitation in it. I did not argue. I did not even think. My body responded before my doubts could catch up, my heels pressing against the marble as I rose slowly from the chair. The room noticed immediately. Of course it did. Movement like this did not go unseen, not when it involved him. I felt every pair of eyes shift again, tracking us, recalculating what they thought they knew. Sebastian stepped slightly closer, not invading, not overwhelming, just enough to create a space around me that felt protected, defined. His hand hovered briefly near my back, not touching, just present, like a boundary no one else could cross. Walk with me, he said. The words were simple, but they carried something else beneath them. Not a request, not quite a command, an invitation with certainty behind it. My breath steadied as I took my first step, the sound of my heels echoing softly against the floor, each movement feeling more real than the last. I was not hiding anymore. I was not shrinking. I was seen. We moved through the room together, not quickly, not slowly, just with purpose. People stepped aside before we reached them, conversations pausing, eyes lowering, paths opening without a word being spoken. I felt it in every step. The difference. The shift. No one laughed. No one whispered. No one dared. It was not because of me. I knew that. But somehow, standing beside him, it felt like it was. Halfway across the ballroom, a woman approached us hesitantly, her smile careful, measured, nothing like the one she had worn earlier. I recognized her immediately. She had been one of the loudest, the first to laugh. "Lily," she said, her voice suddenly warm, almost too warm. "I did not realize. I mean, congratulations." The words stumbled slightly, like she was trying to rewrite something that had already been said. I felt my chest tighten, my fingers instinctively brushing the ring again, grounding myself before I responded. For a second, I considered saying nothing, letting the silence speak for itself the way it had before. But something in me shifted. Not anger. Not even satisfaction. Just clarity. "You realized enough?" I said calmly, my voice steady, even, carrying just enough to make her pause. Her smile faltered. Just slightly. Sebastian did not speak. He did not need to. His presence beside me was enough, steady and unwavering, like a quiet reinforcement that did not require explanation. The woman nodded quickly, stepping back, her confidence dissolving as fast as it had appeared. We continued walking. I did not look back. I did not need to. By the time we reached the far end of the ballroom, near the tall glass windows overlooking the city, my breathing had evened out completely. The lights outside stretched endlessly, a reminder that the world was much bigger than this room, much bigger than their opinions. Sebastian stopped, turning slightly toward me, his gaze returning to mine with that same quiet intensity that had started all of this. "Better?" he asked. The question was simple, but it held everything. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders relaxing for what felt like the first time that night. "Different," I said honestly. He studied me for a second, then nodded once, like that answer was enough. Like it always had been. I glanced down at my hand again, the ring no longer feeling foreign, no longer feeling like something temporary. It felt placed, intentional, real. When I looked back up at him, something in my expression must have changed, because for the first time, his gaze softened just slightly, the sharp edges of his control easing into something quieter. "They see you now," he said. I held his gaze, steady, no longer looking away. "No," I replied softly, the words settling into place with quiet certainty. "They see you." For a second, he did not respond. Not immediately. His eyes held mine, steady, unreadable, like he was measuring something deeper than the words I had just said. Then, slowly, something shifted in his expression. Not disagreement. Not correction. Recognition. "They always do," he said quietly. At first, the city lights behind him flickered against the glass, reflecting in his eyes in a way that made it hard to tell where he ended and everything else began. I felt it again. That pull. That quiet gravity that seemed to follow him everywhere. But this time, it did not make me feel smaller. It made me aware of where I stood, of who I was, becoming inside this moment. "And after?" I asked, my voice softer now, less guarded, like I was no longer trying to defend myself from something that had already passed. His gaze did not waver. "After," he said, "they forget what they thought before." The words settled between us, calm and certain, like everything else he said. I turned slightly, looking back at the room through the reflection in the glass instead of directly, watching how people moved, how they spoke, how carefully they avoided drawing attention now. It was subtle, but it was real. Their behavior had changed. Not because they understood me, but because they understood him. My fingers brushed against the ring again, slower this time, more intentional, like I was accepting its presence instead of questioning it. "That does not feel like respect," I said quietly. "It feels like fear." There was no accusation in my voice, just observation. He nodded once, almost immediately, like he had expected that answer. "It is," he replied. No denial, no attempt to soften it, just truth. I let that sit for a second, my gaze lowering slightly, my thoughts moving in a direction I had not expected when this night began. "Then what happens when you are not here?" The question came out before I could stop it. Honest, unfiltered, real. Because that was the part no one talked about. The part that mattered after the moment ended. For the first time since he sat beside me, he did not answer right away. His silence was not empty. It was deliberate, thoughtful. I could feel it, the way his attention shifted inward for just a second, like he was choosing the right words instead of the easy ones. "Then they learn again," he said finally. His voice was still calm, still controlled, but there was something different beneath it now. Something quieter. something that felt less like power and more like intention. I looked up at him, really looked this time, not at the suit, not at the presence, not at the way the room reacted to him, but at him, at the man behind all of it. You do not seem like someone who leaves things to chance, I said. It was not a question. He held my gaze for a moment longer, then a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. Not warmth. Not quite. But something close. I do not, he said. The answer was simple, but it carried weight. The kind of weight that suggested decisions were made long before they were spoken out loud. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders relaxing as the last of the tension I had carried into this room began to fade. Not completely, but enough. So what happens now? I asked, my voice steadier than it had been all night. This time, he did not hesitate at all. His gaze flickered briefly to my hand, to the ring, then back to my eyes, locking in with quiet certainty. Now, he said, they adjust. I followed his gaze, looking down at the ring once more, but it no longer felt like something placed on me. It felt like something I had stepped into. A role, a position, a shift. When I looked back up, something inside me had settled. Not fully, not completely, but enough to stand a little straighter. Enough to breathe a little easier. Enough to meet his eyes without looking away. And me? I asked softly. He did not look away. Not for a second. You decide, he said. And for the first time that night, the choice felt real. The choice did not feel loud. It did not arrive like a decision you announce or defend. It settled quietly, somewhere beneath my ribs, steady and undeniable. I looked down at my hand again, at the ring that had shifted everything without asking permission, and for the first time, I did not question whether it belonged there. I asked whether I did. My fingers relaxed, no longer hovering, no longer uncertain, just resting naturally at my side. When I looked back at him, my gaze did not waver. Not out of confidence. Not yet. But out of something quieter. Acceptance of the moment as it was. I am still me, I said softly. It was not a challenge. Not a warning. Just a truth I needed him to hear. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes acknowledged it immediately. Good, he replied. Simple. Certain. Like that was the only answer he would have accepted. The noise of the room had shifted again. Not louder, not softer, just different. Conversations carried on, but they no longer included me as a topic. I was no longer something to be discussed. I was something to be aware of. The difference was subtle, but it mattered. A server passed by with a tray of drinks, hesitating for a fraction of a second before offering one to me first. I noticed it. The order of attention had changed. Not dramatically, just enough to feel real. I accepted the glass without thinking, my fingers steady now, the cool surface grounding me in something normal. Something familiar. Sebastian watched the exchange without comment, his attention sharp but contained, like he was cataloging everything without needing to react. You see it, he said quietly. Not a question. I nodded once, my gaze following the movement of the room. The way people adjusted their posture when they passed, the way their voices lowered just slightly when they spoke near us. They are careful now, I said. He tilted his head slightly, considering that. They are aware now, he corrected. I let that settle, the distinction clearer than I expected. Care fades. Awareness stays. I took a slow breath. The tension that had once filled my chest now replaced with something steadier, something that did not feel like survival anymore. It felt like presence. This does not fix everything, I said after a moment, my voice even, grounded. It was important to say, important to remember. His gaze did not waver. It was not meant to, he replied. No false promises. No illusions. Just clarity. I respected that more than I expected to. Silence settled between us again, but it was different now. Not heavy. Not uncertain. Just quiet. Comfortable in a way that did not demand anything from me. I shifted slightly, my free hand moving instinctively to rest against my stomach again. A familiar gesture that felt more natural now that I was no longer trying to hide it. His eyes followed the movement briefly, not with curiosity, not with judgment, just acknowledgement. Does this change what you want? He asked. The question was simple, but it reached deeper than anything else he had said. I paused, not because I did not know the answer, but because I wanted to say it right. No, I said finally. My voice did not shake. It changes how I stand while I want it. Something in his expression shifted again, subtle but real, like he understood exactly what I meant without needing more. Then stand, he said quietly. No pressure. No expectation. Just permission. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders settling into a posture that felt different from before. Not guarded. Not defensive. Just steady. Around us, the room continued, but it no longer felt like something I had to survive. It felt like something I could move through. And for the first time that night, I realized something that stayed with me longer than the whispers, longer than the stares, longer than even the ring on my hand. He did not change who I was. He changed how the world reacted when I refused to shrink. The room had settled into a new rhythm, one that no longer pushed against me but moved around me, adjusting without resistance, like water finding a different path. I stood there for a moment, feeling it, not just observing but experiencing the shift as something real, something earned in a way I had not expected. My fingers curled slightly around the glass in my hand, the cool surface grounding me while everything else felt strangely weightless. "You are thinking," Sebastian said quietly beside me. Not a question, not even curiosity, just observation. I let out a small breath, my gaze drifting across the room again, catching fragments of conversations that carefully avoided crossing into our space. "I am trying to understand," I admitted. My voice was calm now, steady in a way that surprised me. "Not them. This." I lifted my hand slightly, the ring catching the light again, but this time it did not feel like a spotlight. It felt like a marker, a line between before and after. He followed the motion with his eyes, then returned his gaze to mine without hesitation. "It is simpler than you think," he said. I tilted my head slightly, a faint, almost skeptical expression crossing my face. "It does not feel simple." For a second, something close to amusement flickered in his eyes, subtle and controlled, but unmistakably there. "That is because you are used to carrying everything alone," he replied. The words landed softly, but they carried weight. Not accusation, not pity, just recognition. I did not respond immediately. I did not need to, because he was right. I had been carrying it alone. The judgment, the whispers, the quiet calculations people made when they thought I was not paying attention. I had learned to absorb it, to shrink around it, to survive it without ever challenging it. Until now. "And you do not?" I asked, my voice quieter this time, more curious than guarded. He did not hesitate. "No," the answer was immediate. Certain, but not arrogant. Just factual. I studied him for a second, really studied him, trying to understand what that meant, what it looked like to move through the world without that weight. "What does that feel like?" I asked before I could stop myself. It was an honest question, maybe the first completely unguarded one I had asked all night. He considered it for a moment, his gaze steady, thoughtful. "It feels like knowing the room adjusts," he said finally. "Not you." The simplicity of it made something shift inside me again. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to make me aware of how much I had been bending without realizing it. I looked down at my hand again, at the ring that now felt less like a shield and more like a reminder. Not of him, but of the moment I stopped bending. A voice approached us again, hesitant but determined this time. A man, older, well-dressed, the kind of person who had likely never questioned his place in any room before tonight. "Sebastian," he said, his tone respectful, careful. "I did not realize you would be attending." Sebastian turned slightly, his posture unchanged, his presence just as controlled as before. "I was not planning to," he replied. Simple, direct. The man nodded quickly, his gaze flickering toward me for a fraction of a second before returning to Sebastian. "Of course," he said. "If there is anything you need." His sentence trailed off, unfinished but understood. An offer. Not to me. To him. I felt it clearly. The difference in how people approached us now. Sebastian did not acknowledge the offer directly. He did not need to. "We are fine," he said, his voice calm but final. The man nodded again, stepping back immediately, his presence dissolving as quickly as it had appeared. I watched him go, my thoughts quiet, focused, settling into something clearer than before. "They speak to you," I said softly. "But they are reacting to me." Sebastian glanced at me, a faint shift in his expression, something that looked almost like approval. "They are reacting to the decision," he corrected. I let that sit, my fingers brushing the ring once more, not out of uncertainty, but acknowledgement. The decision. Not his. Not theirs. Mine. And for the first time that night, I understood something that did not feel temporary, did not feel dependent on his presence or the room or the moment. I had not just been seen. I had chosen to stop disappearing. The realization did not come all at once. It unfolded slowly, like something that had always been there, waiting for me to notice it. I stood there beside him, no longer counting the eyes in the room, no longer measuring the distance between who I was and who they thought I should be. That distance had disappeared, not because they had changed their expectations, but because I had stopped trying to meet them. My fingers rested lightly against the ring, not tracing it this time, not questioning it, just acknowledging it as part of the moment that had drawn a line I could not step back across. "You are quieter," Sebastian said beside me. His voice was low, steady, observant as always. I glanced at him, a faint, almost thoughtful expression settling across my face. "I am not quieter," I replied softly. "I am just not reacting anymore." The difference mattered. Before, every look, every whisper, every subtle shift in tone had felt like something I had to respond to defend against, to absorb. Now, they passed through me without landing. Not because they disappeared, but because I stopped giving them a place to stay. He watched me for a moment, his gaze steady, almost searching, like he was measuring the shift in me the same way he had measured the room earlier. Then he nodded once, slow and deliberate. "That is when it changes," he said. I did not ask what he meant. I already understood. A small movement near the edge of the room caught my attention. The same woman from earlier, the one who had laughed, now speaking quietly with someone else, her posture more restrained, her voice lowered. She glanced in my direction once, quickly, then looked away again, as if even that brief acknowledgement carried weight now. It was not apology. It was not regret. It was awareness. And somehow that was enough. "They will remember this," I said, more to myself than to him. "Yes," he replied, "but not the way you think." I turned slightly, my gaze returning to his, curious but no longer uncertain. "Then how?" He held my gaze for a second longer, then spoke with that same quiet certainty that had carried through every word he said. "They will remember how they felt when they realized they were wrong." The answer settled into me, deeper than anything else that had been said, not because it changed them, but because it changed how they would approach the next moment, the next person, the next assumption. Maybe not all at once. Maybe not forever. But enough. Enough to matter. I took a slow breath, my shoulders relaxing fully now, the last trace of tension leaving my body in a way that felt final. The room was still the same. The people were still the same. But I was not. And that made everything else different. My hand moved instinctively again, resting against my stomach, not to protect, not to hide, just to acknowledge. To remind myself that this was still real, still mine, still something I chose to stand for, no matter how the world responded. His gaze followed the movement briefly, then returned to my face, steady and grounded. "You are not alone in this," he said quietly. The words were simple, but they did not feel like a promise. They felt like a statement. I nodded slightly, not because I needed reassurance, but because I recognized the difference between being alone and choosing how to stand. "I know," I said, and for the first time, it was true in a way that did not depend on him standing beside me. Silence settled again, but it was no longer filled with tension or uncertainty. It was clear, open, steady. I looked out at the city beyond the glass, the lights stretching endlessly into the distance, each one representing a different story, a different moment, a different version of standing or shrinking. "This was never about them," I said softly, the realization forming completely as the words left my lips. "No," he replied. "It never is." I let that settle, my gaze returning to the room one last time, not to measure it, not to react to it, just to see it for what it was. A place, a moment, nothing more. And as I stood there, no longer trying to belong, no longer trying to explain myself, I understood something that would stay with me long after the lights dimmed and the voices faded. I did not need the room to accept me. I only needed to stop asking it to. The night did not end the way it began. It did not collapse under the weight of whispers or dissolve into the quiet humiliation I had prepared myself to carry home. Instead, it stretched forward, steady and controlled, like something that had been redirected rather than broken. I stood there a moment longer, letting the silence settle into something final, something that did not need to be filled. My hand rested naturally at my side, the ring no longer something I noticed every second, but something I carried without thinking. That was the difference. It was no longer the center of the moment. I was. I turned slightly, my gaze moving across the room one last time, not searching for reactions, not measuring expressions, just seeing. People moved. Conversations resumed. Glasses clinked softly. The world continued. But it no longer pressed against me. It moved around me. Sebastian shifted beside me, just enough for me to feel the change in his posture without needing to look. "Ready?" he asked. The question was simple, but it carried more than just the moment. It carried everything that came after. I paused, not because I was uncertain, but because I wanted to feel the answer fully before I gave it. My fingers brushed lightly against my stomach, grounding myself in the one thing that had never been part of their judgment, only part of their misunderstanding. Then I nodded. Yes. The word came easily. No hesitation. No second thought. We moved together toward the exit, not rushed, not dramatic, just decided. The same doors that had once felt distant now opened without resistance, the staff stepping aside instinctively, their movements precise and respectful. Outside, the night air was cooler, quieter, real in a way the ballroom had not been. I took a slow breath, the tension that had once filled my chest now completely gone, replaced with something steadier, something that did not feel like it needed to be protected anymore. For a second, we stood there in silence, the city stretching out around us, lights reflecting off glass and steel, endless and indifferent. I turned to him, my gaze steady, no longer searching for something I could not name. "You did not have to do that," I said. It was not a question. It was not even a challenge. Just a truth I needed to acknowledge. He met my gaze without hesitation, his expression calm, unchanged from the moment he first sat beside me. "I know," he replied. There was no explanation, no justification, just certainty. I studied him for a moment longer, trying to understand something that did not follow the rules I had learned to expect. "Then why?" I asked. The question was softer this time, less guarded, more open. He did not answer immediately. His gaze shifted briefly, not away from me, but outward, like he was considering something beyond the moment, beyond the night itself. Then he looked back at me, his eyes steady, clear, unshaken. "Because they were wrong," he said simply. The answer settled into me, not as something dramatic, not as something overwhelming, but as something complete. I nodded once, not because I needed more, but because I understood enough. The city moved around us, cars passing, distant sounds rising and falling, the world continuing in its own rhythm. And for the first time that night, I felt like I was part of it, not something standing outside, waiting to be let in. I looked down at my hand one last time, the ring catching the faint glow of the streetlights, no longer a symbol of what had happened inside, but a quiet reminder of what had shifted within me. When I looked back up, my gaze did not linger on him for long. Not because he did not matter, but because I did. "They shamed me for something they did not understand," I said softly, the words steady, grounded, real. Then I took a slow breath, my shoulders relaxed, my posture unchanged by the weight of anything outside of me. But they did not realize. I paused, just for a second, letting the truth settle fully before I finished it. I was never the one who needed to change. And this time, I did not wait for the world to agree.